What is up, y'all? This is Donald from Nerding Out Sports. I'll be taking the reins for tonight because our creator of the channel, Rob, has some family things, so we want to send prayers out to his family and to him, and send our love because he is the man. So, hats off, Rob. I hope you're okay, bro, and we'll see you soon. So, in the meantime, I am joined by my co-hosts, the Boys in the Big Apple podcast. We got Luca and we got Alex of Big Blue in the Bronx channel. So we've got some breaking news, guys. Jordan Rannon says that we're closing in on a possible Daniel Jones contract. $40 million. Oh my God. So I'll give my opinion last, but we're gonna start with the hosts here. So we'll go with Luca first of all. What are your thoughts? So first of all, how are you? And what are your thoughts on this Daniel Jones thing?
I'm doing good. I just can't wait for. I'm obviously a Jet fan, so I can't wait for this quarterback stuff to end. Whether it's Giants or Jets, it's just a whole debate. More polarizing for the Giant fans, in my opinion. But regardless, obviously Donald just mentioned the report about Jordan Ronan saying the Giants and Daniel Jones are progressing towards a deal. But the most important factor that I saw that kind of got me at least was Field Yates retweeting and saying, Daniel Jones might be the first, might be one of the another quarterback to earn $40 million per year, and I think that is an absolutely outrageous salary. What has Daniel Jones at this point proven to Giant fans or the roster or the front office to be getting $40 million a year? In my opinion, it would be suicide for Joe Shane to do that. You're essentially killing any kind of building for your team. Remember, you also have to re-sign Saquon. You also have to sign, free agents to improve on your positions like linebacker and corner, maybe safety. Obviously, if Julian Love leaves, also got a draft class to sign. It's suicide if you re-sign him. It just doesn't look good right now. I don't think it's a win-win scenario. We'll obviously dive into the deep parts of that, but $40 million a year for a guy who's had pedestrian production, Donald.
Exactly. I mean, let's start with the tweet from Bobby Skinner, because I think he's got this spot on.
Right.
Bobby says here, this would have to be structured close to the way Derek Carr's contract was to make sense. That AAV would be a minimum of 17.7% of the cap for 2023. There's no precedence for a guy with Daniel Jones' body of work getting that. And who exactly are they bidding against? Franchise tag him. And I completely agree with those sentiments right there. What is Daniel Jones' body of work that would justify this kind of contract?
I know everybody says, you can't always look at stats, but let's look at the production. 2019, his rookie season with Pat Shurmur, 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. I think he was close to breaking the record that was set but reset by Baker Mayfield, 3,027 yards passing, quarterback rating of 87.7. The year after, new head coach Joe Judge. You obviously got Jason Garrett coming in, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Obviously, everybody makes and this can be a whole thing here. 2021 was more of the same, but everybody's like, oh, the offensive coordinator, oh, the offensive line, the wide receivers, this, that. What is Daniel Jones' ceiling when he is only thrown for over 20 touchdowns once? Once has it happened. That was in his rookie season with Pat Shurmur, and it wasn't a great core then. So why are Giant fans? I'm not saying this is all Giant fans. Why are some Giant fans making excuses? Oh, well, he didn't have this. How could he rise above a certain level in one year when he can't do it in others? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. He obviously showed flashes as a rookie, but Giants fans have to answer a question: does he have the ability to overcome certain, flaws? Not flaws of his own, but like roster flaws. Like, with obviously he dealt with the receivers this year. Obviously, a lot of them getting hurt, but can he overcome adversity is the main question.
So what I don't understand is why Joe Shane is jumping like head first into this. Like, this is a huge statement to make, and only really you could argue that this is his first year of the rebuild,
Right.
first year of the rebuild. Last year went great. It was an awesome story. It was a lot of fun.
Fun
Um,
ride.
but normally, when new regimes come in
Right.
to a situation where it requires a full rebuild, now his first plan was to reset the salary cap,
Of course.
which he's done. Um, so now we've actually got some money to spend now in free agency coming up in 2 weeks' time. Um, that was priority number one. Priority number two, obviously, of course, was to settle this um, Daniel Jones
Of
situation.
course.
Um, they obviously didn't opt into his fifth-year contract because of the fact he had a neck injury, which took him out for the last 6 games of the year.
Hmm.
Right, so he had a lot to prove this year. And from what I saw, his yards per attempt were very low, right? Because it was very simple, like crossing routes, very simple,
Nothing complex.
nothing complex necessarily. It was simple, like routes that were in his eye line that he could quickly deliver the ball because they didn't have the offensive line, the pass protection, I should say, because they're good at run blocking, but the pass protection is not great. So they were like, let's just get the ball out quick. But they didn't exactly trust Daniel Jones. Like,
Right.
I would say for the first, like, you could argue that the first 13 weeks of the year, they didn't trust Daniel Jones that much because
Of course.
the first half of the year, it was Saquon Barkley
Hmm.
carrying 70% of the offense, right? And then we even got to the Texans game in the second half of the year where Saquon Barkley had an ungodly number of carries. It was like 32 carries or something like that. And he was the entire offense against the Texans. It was only really after that game where they started to take the training wheels off Daniel Jones a little bit.
Hmm.
And it was still only moderately. It was still very much schematic, I think,
Yeah.
that progressions that he made. And it was solid, but I would say that he was at his best against the Vikings. What was it, week 15?
Yeah. Definitely.
Um, I think it was. I think that was a. I think he played great in that game.
Of course.
It was despite it being a loss, he played really well. And then the next week we had the Colts, and he was fantastic against the Colts. Obviously, he was the reason why we won that game. And then the week after, we had the Vikings in the playoffs, and that was great.
Hmm.
And yeah, he was the reason why we won that game as well. So he was good for about 3 or 4 weeks of him being top level. Is that enough over a whole span of a 4-year contract where his rookie year he had fumbleitis?
Hmm.
Year 2 was a complete disaster. Year 3 was a complete disaster. Year 4, he started to slowly come around. But still, his numbers are fairly average.
Right.
Like,
Pedestrian.
very pedestrian, like 15 touchdowns. I mean, I'm not diminishing what he did. He had a fine year considering the circumstances.
Hmm.
But I never once for a minute thought that we would even be discussing $40 million.
It's ridiculous.
It is.
It,
So, like, my point really is that's not how I build a football team. If my general manager who's walking into a rebuild situation and he's kind of got a clean slate, got a clean canvas of things to do, you usually want to reset the quarterback rookie clock. That's
right.
how most franchises do, unless they've got an elite quarterback. But the Giants don't have an elite quarterback, so that's my point. Luca, how would you have built this situation if you're Joe Shane?
Well, don't. I'll, I'll say this: smart GMs build the team before the quarterback, not the
Oh,
quarterback
really?
for the team. Now, this is obviously a scenario where Daniel Jones had a lot of bad around him. He wasn't necessarily drafted into the right situation. We can say all that, but another thing that you were talking about the low yards per attempt, it's never been above 7. First of all, or 8 yards per attempt. And I don't want to say this like I'm diminishing his production, but the numbers are, first of all, very pedestrian. Don't you think he's gotten a lot of help with yards after the catch?
Yep.
Saquon Barkley, Darius Slayton on some plays. You obviously got Isaiah Hodgins who's came on. So we're people that say you can't always read the stats, but I'm glancing at Saquon and Daniel Jones' stats, and if I look at both of them, I could easily say, well, who was the main cog in this game? First of all, let's go to week 1. I'm not going to do every game, but we're going to open against the Titans. Saquon Barkley, 18 attempts, 164 rushing yards, a touchdown, and 6.6 rushing yards after contact. I can't get the exact number of yards per attempt, but in the same game, Daniel Jones, 17 to 21, 188 yards. Efficient, but he wasn't the reason why they won the game. Was he a part of it? Sure, but he wasn't the whole reason. Let's go to week 2. 19-16 victory. Daniel Jones, 22 of 34, 176 yards. That amounted to doesn't really say here, but regardless, Saquon Barkley, 21 carries, 72 yards. That was more of like a grit and grind kind of game. It was more of a defensive battle.
Like Jones was bad in week 2. He
wasn't that great. I just wish I could see the yards per attempt. But anyways, regardless, let's go to week 3 against Dallas. 20 of 37, 196 for Jones. Barkley, 14 of 81 for.
So the first 3 weeks of the year, he hasn't even cleared 190 yards passing.
Only once. That was against Dallas, 196. But some of those yards, adding context, was garbage time.
None has cleared 200 so far. Okay.
Let's look. I'm going to be selective with these games. I'm not going to take all day. Let's look at week 4 against the Bears. A really rainy game, 20 to 12 victory. Saquon Barkley, 31 carries for 146 yards.
He was phenomenal in that game.
Green Bay. This is an interesting game. Daniel Jones exceeds 200 passing yards for the first time. 21 to 27, 217 yards, 12 first downs. First down percentage was above 42%.
Yeah, he was good.
Yards per attempt, can't seem to find that here, but regardless, Saquon Barkley against Green Bay, 13 to 70. Now, this is a game where they kind of relied a little more on Jones, but fair enough. I'd say he had a part in winning this game, a major part, but it was also Saquon in the receiving game as well. So I got to give credit to both of them there. Let's go to Jacksonville. Daniel Jones, 202 yards again. Saquon Barkley, 110 yards. And there was only 2 games after this that he exceeded 300 yards. One was actually in garbage time, which is against Detroit. You guys get blown out. 200 yards against Dallas on Thanksgiving. You could say that was garbage time too, because I think the coaching staff kind of backed off a little bit. I'm not going to say they mailed it in completely, but they kind of did.
No, you're right. Yep.
Washington, 200 yards in the tie game. And everything else, 100 yards.
Yeah, and he wasn't good against the Texans either. What was the numbers against the Texans?
Numbers against the Texans, 13 of 17, 197 yards, 40% first down percentage, 8 first downs. That's what it was.
I mean, listen, I'm not diminishing the year he had, but those are average numbers, man. Those are very league average numbers. And do you want to devote 20% of your cap to someone that you can arguably say Brian Dable helped him for much of that? I thought a lot of it was scheme. I thought a little bit was Jones, but I thought a lot of it was scheme. I thought that the scheme was very much well suited to Daniel Jones. Like, there wasn't exactly difficult concepts in terms of routes. I thought a lot of them were crossing routes in his eye line and just very easy reads, just simple, just get the ball out quick, move the ball quick. And it worked. And he was starting to get very comfortable in that. And then he started to really flourish until the Eagles game, which seems to have been conveniently forgotten by the Giants front office. I mean, the Eagles, the first thing they did was take away the Giants' quick game. They took away all his quick, easy reads, and suddenly he looked like a rabbit in the headlights, in my opinion. I didn't think he was good. And I'm sorry, if I'm paying someone $40 million, that's Patrick Mahomes' money, and it's $17 million more than what Josh Allen's getting paid. I expect more than that.
Of course.
Like, it's just simple math, man. Like, the salary cap is not set up for rebuilding franchises to use 20% of your cap on a league average quarterback.
Of course.
In my opinion.
I agree. When you talk, and you brought up a great point, Donald, like a lot of Giants fans, I shouldn't say a lot, but like the Daniel Jones stands, obviously there's two parties in this one, maybe three. There's the middlemen, there's the Daniel Jones stands, there's the Daniel Jones not so stands. One of the biggest questions, first of all, there's two things. This is a twofold kind of way. Can Daniel Jones ever beat an elite defense? The Eagles were an elite defense. Could he ever pick them apart? Because, as you said, they took away his short passing game. They stacked the box. They said, you know what? You're going to go beat us deep because we have the linebackers to stack the box. We have the defensive linemen. We have the pass rush. And everybody's like, oh, well, nobody played good in that game. Well, no, Daniel Jones, if he's going to be your franchise quarterback, he has to overcome adversity. Has to. Trevor Lawrence is a franchise quarterback. He can overcome adversity. And another thing when talking about Dable and whatnot, like, what was Daniel Jones before Dable? Like, if you want, Donald, you can give me a ranking. Where would you, before Brian Dable came here, where would you rank Daniel Jones among quarterbacks in the NFL?
Well, I think NFL.com had him rated 25th.
That's fair.
And starting quarterbacks. I would argue that he was actually worse than that last year. I would say that he was probably the second worst starting quarterback in the NFL last year, maybe third worst. His numbers were not good, man. He had 10 passing touchdowns?
10 I'll get the stats in a second, but to me,
his numbers were not good. He was hurt for obviously much of it, but he just didn't look good. And I didn't think for a million years, that you would even be having this discussion right now after the year he had last year. And in 2021, he was a bad quarterback. And
100%.
Somehow, in just 2 years' time, we're talking about Patrick Mahomes' money. There has to be middle ground here, man. It's just like simple logic. Like,
right, I understand.
Take that massive jump from someone who was legitimately a really bad starting quarterback 2 years ago
to be average.
Yeah. To being league average, and then suddenly that's earned you $40 million a year?
He did not take a Josh Allen leap.
No.
And as you were right, like a lot of selling points for Giants fans to tell, say to re-sign Daniel Jones, his turnovers got down. Cool. But is he doing anything special? No. If you obviously have to build this in the long term. You want a quarterback who can eventually get you to the promised land, the Super Bowl, to win a Super Bowl. Is Daniel Jones that guy? You have to decide right now. Because if you sign him to a 4-year contract, you are banking on him somehow rising to elite, maybe good star status. It's just so difficult for me to say, how many, first of all, let me say this. How many quarterbacks are late bloomers? How many elite quarterbacks are late bloomers?
Normally by year 2.
In their second contract.
Yeah. Oh, right. No.
I can't name any. Man. I can't.
Can you name any? Maybe Kirk Cousins?
He's not elite though. Either? He's good. You're only gonna win. You're only gonna win so much with him.
Exactly.
You obviously there's obviously a few outliers: Joe Flacco, Nick Foles, whoever. To non-elite quarterbacks who win the Super Bowl, they also have stacked teams around him. But you need a good to elite quarterback to win a Super Bowl.
Right. So yeah, you're right. Okay. So thinking about their second contract, which quarterbacks actually get better in their second quarterback and in their second contracts?
I'm serious. I can't really think of any. Aaron Rodgers was elite before he got his second contract. Tom Brady was obviously elite because he won Super Bowls before his second contract. Patrick Mahomes was elite from the get-go.
Of
Josh
course.
Allen was elite in his third year, and it's carried over.
Yep.
Let me think. Lamar
And even
Jackson
if
was
you
elite. It still is.
exactly, and even if you take away elite and just say very good or just good, there's not that many either. Like I would say Kirk Cousins is one. I
It's
mean, at the end of the day, a, a league average quarterback will get you as far as the rest of your general manager does in terms of building around him. That's as far as a league average quarterback will go, is if your general manager can build a good team around you. But you're not going to be a Super Bowl team. How
Mhm.
many Super Bowls have been won by a league average quarterback that took them all the way? Now, obviously, Nick Foles came in towards the end of the Eagles winning a championship. He's obviously at that time league average. Now he's terrible. Jared Goff, league average quarterback, but again, that Rams team was like red
stacked.
hot. So Matt Stafford's
I actually have a
average
list of
quarterback.
late bloomer quarterbacks.
Go for
Technically,
it.
first of all, you've compared Daniel Jones to this guy, Alex Smith. Alex Smith was one of the late bloomers. Next up, Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I don't think it was his second. No, it wasn't even his second contract. When was he drafted?
Mm-hmm.
Garoppolo. You also have a comment in the chat, Donald.
Yeah, no, I know. And Nelson, let Daniel Jones play with his franchise tag for 1 year. I'm with you, man. Nelson, would you have him on the franchise tag or the transition tag? That's my question because uh, I think that I wouldn't even necessarily give him the franchise tag because it's 32.
Um,
Um,
yeah,
because
another
Brian
late
Dable
bloomer.
only wants Daniel Jones.
Mhm.
Well, I don't really want my head coach to be deciding for the general manager because there has to be finances involved and you have to play this smart.
Of
At
course,
the end of the day, like, what is the market for Jones? Like,
of
say the
course.
Giants just went, all right, you want to play this game with us? Okay. Well, how about you go test the market, right? How many teams are going to be willing to pay him what the Giants are reportedly about to give him?
Be silly.
Like, how
Absolutely
many
silly.
teams? Like, would you say maybe the Colts? But then the Colts could be like, well, why would I do that? Because I could then just go and draft Stroud,
Yeah,
who's
they have a
arguably
very
going to
high
be
pick.
better.
I
So,
think they have a high pick. I don't know.
so yeah, they do, yeah, because they had an awful year. So the Colts, I don't think the Colts are an option. Maybe Tampa Bay because they might be out of the kind of the race for the top five quarterbacks, possibly. Um, maybe Tampa Bay. But then again, Tampa Bay could be like, well, why would I want to be paying him $40 million a year? I don't think any team is going to be doing that. I don't think there's a single team in the National Football League that would pay him what he's looking for. Now, Luca, you are a Jets fan, and the Jets are flush with salary cap space. Would you pay even 35 for Daniel Jones a year?
No, not at all. Like, first of all, the Jets really aren't flush with cap space, so they obviously got to make room for it. Same with Derek Carr, whatever. I'm not giving him 35 based on the production he's given. Like,
Mm-hmm.
as I said, how many times? Like, oh, he needs a solid offense. He needs this. He needs that. At some point, he's got to overcome. Like, what is his ceiling? What is honestly his ceiling? You could go back to his draft profile or whatever. I didn't read it, but all I know was he was going to be a solid quarterback. Like, again, with the late, I was addressing the late bloomer quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's a game manager, so he's not really like good to great. He's going to win your Super Bowl. Matt Schaub, never a great quarterback. David Garrard, never a great quarterback. Kerry Collins, who you saw throw 5 interceptions in the Super Bowl,
Oh,
never a great quarterback.
well, that's a great example. Kerry Collins did get the Giants to a Super Bowl, and I do remember that Super Bowl. But it once again speaks to the ceiling that a league average quarterback will get you because you'll maybe get you if you've got a really good team around you, you might get you to that point, but he's never going to take you over that point because Kerry Collins completely imploded in the Super Bowl with probably the worst Super Bowl performance of all time.
Right.
And we've got Alex back, ready to rock and roll. Let's add him. How are we doing, my guy?
Had a busy day, obviously, as we talked off camera, but doing well other than that.
Okay, so give me
Best
your thoughts on this Daniel Jones situation, man. Me and Luca are discussing um, what the upside is here for the Giants with this kind of contract.
so it's a difficult concept. Um, I don't like the idea of giving him $40 million because I don't think he's worth that. But I'm also not giving up on Joe Shane like others are. And the way this relates to the question is how Joe Shane plans on structuring this contract and how he can build a team with this contract being in place. Because I don't know if they have the same opinion as we do in terms of ceiling. Like, I think Daniel Jones is a ceiling. I think we can all agree with that. It's just do they know that he has limits and that they're going to have to build like a super team around him? So, um, it's I'm not giving up on Shane yet, but he has to do a superb job in the next 2 years. I mean, the deal isn't done yet, but he has to do a superb job in the next 2 years of building a team. Uh, if this contract over 40 million gets done.
So we
It's
got
got to be
a
like an
comment here.
Eagles level team.
His representatives is asking for much money, but no way Joe Shane is paying that money. We're also allowing Saquon Barkley to leave. Well, I think that's a huge mistake because, in my opinion, I'd prioritize Saquon over paying Daniel Jones because Saquon's actually an anomaly. Normally, I don't pay running backs, but Saquon meant far more to the franchise, in my opinion, this year than Daniel Jones did. And I know I'm in a minority with that, but Saquon Barkley was the offense, in my opinion. Well, certainly for 75% of the year, he was our offense. So, I don't think. I think we're maybe just. I think Joe Shane has gotten wrapped up in this a little bit. I think he's been caught up in the excitement of winning your first playoff game, and I think he wants to roll it back. But at what cost? And this kind of reminds me, Luca, as a Knick fan, of what Leon Rose did after the anomaly of the Knicks making the fourth seed a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Tom Thibodeau was insanely good in his first year coaching.
Completely agree.
He coached the hell out of that team, and he got them to play about 15% above their level, right? And it was a great year. It captured the whole of New York, just like what the Giants have done. And it was a great story. Then it got to the off season, and then they were like, okay, so what do we do? Well, we're going to roll it back. But then what they did was they overpaid for guys with limited ceilings.
Of course.
Obviously, this is not a next pod, but what they did was overpay on a number of players on their limited ceilings, and all of them failed.
I even said this earlier. It's like a 2017 situation. You don't want that with the Giants.
No,
and
that's right. It's kind of like the Jerry Reese thing, but it just kind of reminds me of that with the Knicks, where they overpaid and then they immediately regretted that decision because they got wrapped up in how awesome year one was. But you don't want to overrate the talent on the team and how far there is still to go with this team. And so, let's just look at the roster, okay? The Giant roster as is. Who would you count as elite in their respective positions? I would say Adoree Jackson. I would say Andrew Thomas, and I would then say Dexter Lawrence, and I would say Saquon Barkley. I think all four of those guys are elite in their respective positions. I think then you get like Kayvon Thibodeau has the potential to be in that conversation, but he's not there yet. Xavier McKinney, same thing. I think he's replaceable, but I think that he's very good. That's kind of it when you're looking at like the top talent in this team. You can maybe mention Leonard Williams, but he kind of had to step back. So, Alex, how would you agree with that assessment? Was there anyone else that you would add?
I don't think you even have to discuss the situation of elite Donald. It's just how many cornerstone pieces we have that are
Okay.
proven. I mean, you could put those same guys on the list. Kayvon, I mean, he had what 4.5 sacks in his rookie year. Aziz is becoming injury prone, so we might have to take an edge. We have nobody at linebacker that's like up in okay, Michael McFadden, but he's reserve. You have no defensive line depth. Leonard Williams, I mean, he's not up to the level what he was paid for, as we talked about a few days ago. In terms of the secondary, as we mentioned, Dory Jackson, Xavier McKinney, I still don't know what he is a little bit because he had a very productive year in year number 2 with Patrick Graham and more of a ball style defense. But in this system, I mean, he was hurt for a lot of the year with that whole accident that happened. So we don't know what he is. Julian Love is probably not coming back. So, I mean, it's just going to be a weird situation in terms of building this team. And I know a lot of people say, well, the franchise tag, and I know Joe Shane says, well, the franchise tag, it kind of impacts the way you build a team and whatnot, but you don't want to backload a long-term extension either because you're not putting yourself in the best position. So I just don't get the whole anti-franchise tag argument. While it could be the best position for this team, if you don't want to sign, for instance, if you're a Giants fan, you don't want to sign Daniel Jones to a long-term extension or something over $40 million, which, is my basic mood over the latter half.
So that's my point, really. So obviously you can say the cornerstone, I'd say elite, what doesn't matter. My point is these guys are going to want to get paid very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier McKinney's due. I don't know if we're going to pay him. But Dory Jackson, you're probably going to want to adjust his contract and you probably want to extend him. Dexter Lawrence, we guaranteed have to, but the defensive tackle market, he's going to be demanding top money. Like he's probably going to be in the, what you'd say, maybe 17 to 23 million range per year. He's going to want money because he's now an elite inside. So now we're in a situation is, can we actually afford to pay these guys and pay Daniel Jones and pay Saquon Barkley, Luca?
Yeah, I don't think that's I don't think you could do just both at the same time. First of all, two things. Number one, I was going down the list of late bloomer quarterbacks. There's only 2 that won a Super Bowl. Steve Young and Len Dawson. That's it. Everybody else was good, never really advanced to winning a Super Bowl. So that just tells you that there's very few quarterbacks who can win a Super Bowl in their second contract.
Exactly.
Another thing, Justin Pennick said, yeah, looking back on it, Joe Shane saying Jones will be back without beginning negotiations with him or his agents was not the smartest thing. Do you guys agree?
Oh, it's a huge mistake. He walked right into that. I mean, it's a rookie mistake because you've kind of taken away the leverage from the Giants by him saying that. It took the leverage away. And every single time that Joe Shane speaks, now I like when Joe Shane speaks because he's a very knowledgeable guy, very personable, very intelligent. You get a good feeling. But when it gets to the Daniel Jones conversation, I get concerned because he's taking away the Giants' leverage every time that he goes all in on Daniel Jones. And all he's been doing is being effusive in the praise, going, Daniel Jones knows how much we love him, how much we feel about him, how much we want this to get done. He's our guy. He's our franchise guy. The more and more you say that, the more and more the agents are going to be like, no, hold firm here, guys. We can hold the line here at 45 because they're desperate for you to come back. So this is something that we can do. And that's my worry. I was thinking that Joe Shane is taking away the Giants' leverage by him talking. He needs to just say, listen, we respect him and we'd love to get a deal done, but there are other options out there and we've got a whole team that we need to build. And we're still very much at the start of our process with or without Daniel Jones. That takes the leverage away from his agents and back on the Giants side, and then you can start to bring that number down. Luca?
Yeah, definitely agree with your points, Donald. Like another thing is like you don't want to be like somebody mentioned on Twitter, and they have a really good point. You can't use re-signing Daniel Jones as an excuse to, first of all, you Giants fans know it. You guys are going to take a step back next year because you're going to try to go in the full rebuild process. And somebody was like, you still could re-sign Daniel Jones, but don't use the excuse that you're going to step back next year to re-sign Daniel Jones just because you're going to spend that time building the team or trying to build the team, and you're going to spend time waiting on what eventually will never happen, and that is Daniel Jones becoming a good to elite quarterback. So it's either you go half-assed in or you go all in on the rebuild. Let's be smart with our asset management. Let's draft. Let's sign proper free agents with good spending money, all that.
Funny thing is the Giants have a lot of leverage here. And I'm surprised that the Giants are taking away this leverage. Like, instead of just being so effusive in your praise of Daniel Jones, why don't you take a step back and go, right, the 2024 quarterback class is absolutely stacked. Option one, right? We're in the mid-20s in our draft stock at the moment, but you can still trade up to the 10 or 11 spot and maybe get an Anthony Richardson or Will Levis if you really like them, right? So there's a little bit of leverage there. You've got two tag situations. One where you franchise them at 32, so that's a massive discount from the 40-something over 5 years, and then there's obviously the other tag where you can say, okay, we'll test the market, and if someone wants to give us a couple first round picks, then great, off you go. Otherwise, we'll keep you for another year. That makes sense as well. What has Daniel Jones done other than a quarter of his 4-year contract? I would say the last quarter of his 4 years where he was maybe above average. That was the only time he was above average in his 4 years as a quarterback in the National Football League to merit this kind of contract.
Nothing.
I mean, yeah, you could use the thing about leading to the playoffs, but I mean, there was other factors that kind of contributed into that. So you really, even then, I mean, that's. I'm trying to word this out correctly. That's like still kind of Kirk Cousins level. Kirk Cousins getting paid 36 million, which would be my ceiling for a contract. But
and he's not Kirk Cousins either. Look at Kirk Cousins' numbers,
production wise. Yeah,
it's half Kirk Cousins' production. So right, the first thing we're going to do is, Alex, give me what you would do right now if you were Joe Shane right now with Daniel Jones. Tag him, whichever tag, or let him walk, or extend him, and for what? And what do you do with Saquon? We'll start with Alex.
Since the demands are so high, I'm going to actually go ahead and apply one of the tags. Both tags are interesting, to be fair, because they give you a lot of room. I think I'm going to go ahead and say the transition tag because if someone decides, if some needy team like the Colts or this team or that team, whatever, they decide to give Daniel Jones whatever he wants, you get two first-round picks the following year, which would be 24 in comp. Now, what you could do with those, you could do a lot of different things. I saw people say Marcus Mariota in free agency. Honestly, at that point, just stick with Tyrod Taylor. You could sit here and draft a quarterback this year, and try to trade up. You have 11 picks, but honestly, I would go in 24 with the transition tag, since you could maybe get a Marvin Harrison, and this is just a stretch, of course, because we don't know where the Giants will finish in 23. Go get a Marvin Harrison, and then maybe within that realm of picks, or at least trade up, get Marvin Harrison and maybe a quarterback or something along those lines. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you could do, but I would personally do the transition tag and then just show it to me one more year, Daniel Jones, if you could, do.
And
this
then
type of
Saquon. What do you do with Saquon?
Now, I don't know if you guys know this. This is just a general question I'm asking. Is transition tag and franchise tag the same amount of money?
No, I think the transition is cheaper.
So let's say for sake of argument, that's about 30. So that would be 30 applied this year. We would have, I think, $18 million left in savings, plus the $6 million. So that's, I think they said, was it 44 or 48 that the Giants would initially start with in cap?
I believe it was like 47. I think it's about 47.
Okay, 47. Okay, 40. Let's jump on and say 46. So you got 46 minus the 30. That's about 16. You add that 16. You add 6 to that because of Galladay's cut. And then maybe, of course, down the line, you'll do Leonard Williams and all this other stuff. So I would say sign Saquon to $14 million contract over like 3 years.
Okay, and then we're going to turn this over also to look at what do you do with Daniel Jones to start with if you're Joe Shane?
If he's being rough with negotiations, like the thing is, my goal is I want to re-sign Saquon and Daniel Jones, but obviously that cannot happen. I might consider letting Daniel Jones walk. Now I get the whole transition tag thing. You could trade him to somewhere. They'll give you 2 first-round picks back, but who's actually like if you give him how much is the transition tag? Does anybody know?
Let's look it up.
I'll see what
because if the transition tag is also unreasonable and you don't think that Daniel Jones can build off his performance, then you might as well just let him walk, sign a veteran quarterback for like minimum money. And I don't want to say like tank the season, but you're kind of punting so you can build the foundation. Then 2024, get the quarterback. And to me, that when you draft a quarterback, it immediately starts your clock. So I think that like I'm not saying
29.
Okay, 29. Now
that's kind of a no-brainer, right?
I would do it.
Okay, but I'm just going to ask who's trading for him.
It doesn't matter because it's cheaper for the year.
Yeah, then you've still got a ton of money where you can get the inside linebacker that you want, and maybe even sign a moderate receiver in free agency, and maybe an offensive lineman with that money.
See, the transition tag in this scenario is actually a win-win, and I think it's the only win-win because if he doesn't go to somebody else, he's sticking here for $29 million, and you get to continue the talks, and then you get to see obviously what he does in season. The other situation is he goes somewhere else. You get 2 first-round picks for next year. You keep building the team, whether you want the quarterbacks this year or then or next year. Let's just say this year you're still kind of building the foundation, and it's the quarterback's rookie year. So you're basically saying, okay, just let him go through his rookie struggles, and then by year 2 he'll at least have a solid foundation. Or you continue to build the foundation, not quarterback this year. You let Tyrod Taylor start, and then next year you draft a quarterback, and he's in a better situation than some of the quarterbacks around the league. The only non-winnable situation is if Daniel Jones decides to sit out, which if he does, that's where I will get pissed. I'm not emotionally attached, as I've said all offseason. I'm surprised, but I'm not with this Daniel Jones $45 million stuff. But if he sits out, I mean, that's just, you have no reason to. But I don't think
he never would. He never would. That's a career suicide for him. Okay, and then look at what would you do regarding Saquon
with the transition tag? I would. What is
if you're working under the pretense that we just let him walk, test free agency, let him walk.
Let Jones test free agency. Okay, so Saquon, what is the numbers that they're negotiating with? I know Saquon wants
16. He wants 16. I think the Giants are in the 10 to 12 range.
Yeah, okay, we offered him 12. I think we offered him 12 at the week 8.
Let's meet in the middle, say $14 million per year and 3 years, with maybe like an option somewhere in there if possible, because obviously, Saquon has history with injuries. I'm not saying that totally derails his production, but that would be my first option. Maybe sign a veteran quarterback for like a year if you want to keep Tyrod Taylor or whatever. But let me ask you this,
which quarterback would you go with? Would you trade up in the draft to look at maybe an Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, whichever? Maybe go and get a Hooker.
I was just about to ask you guys about that. I was just about to ask you about Hendon Hooker
in the second round.
Do you do the sitting route where you sit Hendon Hooker for a few games? Well, first of all, is he even going to play this year? Which we don't know. Mm-hmm. So you sit him ideally behind Tyrod Taylor.
I think I don't mean to interrupt, but I think he said he'd be good by training camp.
I'd still have him sit regardless, but in my opinion, like mostly elite quarterbacks sat behind somebody for a little bit, not the entire year, but a little bit. And I think I'm not saying Hendon Hooker is going to be elite or good, but if you don't want to dip into the Hendon Hooker market or Anthony Richardson, if you don't think you're going to be elite, so just sign a veteran and then go to 2024. And I'm not saying tank, but just keep building foundation.
Yeah. So my opinion is either transition him, because I think that 29 million is actually Daniel Jones' worth.
Yeah.
In the market, in my opinion. I think that's his true market value. Some people will argue he should be 35, whatever, like that. I think if you look at Daniel Jones' 4-year career, 29 is fair. Maybe even 30. So if you're paying him that as a transition tag for one more year, and then if someone wants to give us a couple of first-round picks, all the better. Because that's the thing. What we can't forget is we're in a rebuild.
Of course.
Our roster isn't like completely together. If our roster was completely together, then I wouldn't necessarily mind paying Daniel Jones whatever he wants. Right? If we had a stable roster with cornerstone guys, with a receiver already ready, rocking and ready to roll, and we had Saquon Barkley tied down for a number of years and we're in good shape, then right, okay, well, what do you want? We'll pay it. It doesn't matter, because obviously Daniel Jones at that point would have proven himself more than he has. But we're in this situation where we've actually got half a roster that we still need to build. Yeah. We're only in year one of a rebuild. We don't have any receivers ready for next year. We have Wan'Dale Robinson coming off an ACL who's under contract. We have Colin Johnson who's just coming back from a serious injury under contract. And of course, Isaiah Hodgins on a minimum. That's it. That's the only receivers that we have under contract. So we have an entire receiver room that we need to build. We don't have Saquon Barkley extended yet. We need to get some guards in here, offensive guards. We need to get a center. We have an entire secondary we need to build. We need some Mike linebackers in here. We need some edge rushers. We need a backup at defensive tackle. There's a bunch of positions that we need to fill. And that's somehow we're going to do all that plus pay over the market for Daniel Jones. Like, it doesn't make sense. And that's why I'm annoyed. Why are we throwing ourselves into this like rabbit hole? Like, this is a hole that the Giants might not get out of.
I'm just kind of seriously hoping for the franchise tag, unless Jones has some humbling and goes down to 35 mil. But I don't see it happening, since we're getting these reports from like more reliable people. Mm-hmm. But I'm just hoping for some sort of a tag. And once again, it's not the best option, but at this point in the game, it is your best option.
Well, with Jordan Raanan reporting that the Giants are edging closer, it sounds like they're really desperate to get this thing done. And he seems to think it's going to start with a 4 at the front. So, like, it's unprecedented money to be paying for someone like that's $17 million more than Josh Allen. And it's more than Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this is going to be a ton of money that we're going to be giving him.
I can't really stand for, because I think the way Joe Shane kind of said it, he's like, as I mentioned earlier about the franchise tag, how it basically would kind of be a roadblock to building this team. I'm getting the sense that if the Giants do sign Daniel Jones to some sort of a contract, like within the 4s, and the only way it works out as a silver lining is if you make it incentive based. That's the only way, which we don't know if he's going to meet those incentives. But again, we don't know the structure. But back to my original point about him saying, the franchise tag is going to infringe on this team building. It makes me think that they're going to backload the contract, which I do not want.
Oh no. Exactly. And that's what I'm talking about. You're kind of backing themselves into a corner, which is going to be difficult to get out of in case stuff happens. Like Daniel Jones has not been healthy for much of his 4-year deal. He has been hurt a lot over the 4 years, so there's every possibility they could get hurt again. Um, he's there's that possibility. B, there's a very strong possibility he takes a step back, because we don't really know what his ceiling is. I think it's pretty moderate at best. So there's a good chance he maybe takes a step back, and then the Giants are in a situation like there's a very strong chance that maybe he just only has a very, very average year again. Well, he has exactly the same year, 15 touchdowns, 3,300 yards, but you're paying him $40 million. Then the Giants are going to be really up against it the next offseason as to what to do. And that's why I just don't understand this idea of roster building isn't really in line with how the NFL usually builds its rosters. Like normally you reset the rookie quarterback clock. I mean, you were talking about how Alex Smith, Luca, that he got better in his second contract. Yeah, but the Chiefs didn't win a championship until they drafted Patrick Mahomes. And that's what I'm talking about. There is a ceiling when you extend an average quarterback. You're basically locking yourself into a ceiling, a moderate ceiling.
Two anomalies. Only two quarterbacks in their second contract won a Super Bowl. Steve Young and Len Dawson. Those are complete anomalies, outliers, whatever you want to say.
And Steve Young was a very, very good quarterback.
Yeah.
Always. Daniel Jones has been good for, I mean, how much would you say over that 4-year deal?
The rookie year?
Half a year?
2 games this year?
Yeah, but he wasn't even that good this year. I would say he was good in the second half of the year.
He's average, pedestrian.
Yeah.
It's not good. It's pedestrian. That like Giants fans have lowered their I don't want to say not all Giants fans, they've lowered their expectations for what good is. And I'm surprised because I thought they would have a higher standard when they had guys like Eli and Phil Simms and all of them.
That's right. And that's it. But luckily I'm gonna, lean on my experience here. Luckily I've been able to rely on that experience going, I kind of know what elite quarterback is, and I kind of know that Daniel Jones ain't that. So why are we paying him to be elite? That's where I'm really,
of course,
very worried about. I mean, as I say, like if the Giants were in a more stable situation, I wouldn't mind this contract situation. But considering the holes that they have, I just don't want them to overrate how good they actually are. Alex, wouldn't you say a lot of this was kind of coaching based?
There's not that Daniel Jones didn't make improvements, but yeah, I mean, it was coaching based. Every if you think about it this way, other than his first rookie year, all of it's been coaching based, negatively or positively. First year with Jason Garrett, you could say it was coaching based. And I'm not trying to say Daniel Jones is a robot. No, he's not. Second year, 11 touchdowns. I mean, that's coaching based. This year, improvement, with the turnovers, slightly better production, that's coaching based. So, I mean, I'm not trying to say Daniel Jones is a robot, but this is due a lot due to Brian Dable and what the offensive staff was able to do.
Right. And you would then, if you were being completely objective, you could say, well, there's a very good chance that Brian Dable could probably increase someone else's productivity in the same situation if you brought in another quarterback who was deemed as average. You could probably get roundabout the same kind of numbers as what Daniel Jones gave you. Apart from his rushing numbers, which were really legit, his passing numbers are so pedestrian that I'm pretty sure most quarterbacks could walk in and deliver that over a 16-game season. He only played 16. Obviously, there were 17, but he only played 16. So over the 16 games and he threw 15 touchdowns. I think a lot of quarterbacks could do that.
I think you guys really need a clean slate. The fresh palette, clean slate, whatever you want to say. Long term, he's not your answer. He could be somebody else's. Well, I don't know about winning a Super Bowl, but I mean, a lot of people, there's some people out there last year that probably wanted to trade Daniel Jones, like the Jets did Sam Darnold, and he was in a lot of people's eyes viewed as a stopgap.
Yep.
And have people really changed that decision?
I mean, it's just again, you kind of want your new general manager to walk in and have a new kind of quarterback in place, his guy, and start from scratch, because that's generally the maths are pretty simple in that regard. Like, if you're a rebuilding team, that tends to mean that your quarterback probably isn't elite, right? If you're in a situation where if your quarterback's gone through 4 years and you're 10 games below 500 as a starting quarterback, that tends to mean that you're not elite as a quarterback, right? So if you're in that situation, surely the new general manager would walk in and go, right, let's kind of clean slate a little bit. Let's restart the quarterback rookie clock, and let's bring some better talent in here, and then develop a new quarterback over a 4-year period again to get us up a level. Now, if we were to let Daniel Jones walk, I think obviously short term that would hurt, right? Because he had a very good year. Okay. Medium to long term, it would probably be beneficial. In fact, I would almost say certainly be beneficial, because I really do think that if we were to give Daniel Jones a 4-year deal, I think by year 2 of his 4-year deal, we'll be looking for a new quarterback anyway. And then what are we going to do?
Who knows?
And the last point I want to bring up is Daniel Jones' mentality with these negotiations. So I'm going to start with Luca. How do you feel that he's approached these negotiations in regards to the Giants and obviously himself personally?
Listen, we only know through reports. I'll just put that out there. But if the $40 million reports are true, that's for erroneous, outrageous, whatever term you want to use, because there has to be room for. Again, I think I said it off screen. Maybe I said it earlier. There's athletes out there that take paydays, but they say, you know what? I'll get a little discount my payday a little bit just so you can build around me. Is Daniel Jones going to be that guy? Is he riding that playoff appearance saying, you know, I took this team to the playoffs. I deserve my money. But to me, and there's also another thing where people are saying, you know, if Brian Dable, you know, wants Daniel Jones, then have at it. Not necessarily. I'm not saying the coach shouldn't have say, but what's the ceiling? It's the biggest question. It's what's the ceiling?
Alex, like, how do you think he's approached these negotiations
It's
with the new
kinda
agent
weird.
and all this stuff?
All of it is kind of weird, and I don't know if it's Joe Shane also taking apart and curtailing what the media narrative is. But if anyone watched his presser at the combine, he said basically something along the lines of, "We didn't negotiate with CAA." So they didn't even get started there. They didn't even start negotiations there, at least according to Joe Shane's word. But the thing is, along these lines is Joe Shane could be lying, because what's the difference between what they were saying during the CAA reign of like the $40-45 million range, and now? There's absolutely no difference, so Joe Shane could be lying to us, is what I'm saying. So I think I'm going to believe that it's been the same price tag the whole time. It's interesting. I'm just sort of surprised, but not emotionally attached with this whole Daniel Jones thing, and you know, him asking for 45. I think it's outlandish, but we'll see.
I've got a word for you, and is this too strong? Is it a little bit selfish of Daniel Jones?
You could go there a little bit, yeah.
Definitely.
Do you think it's partly because he feels slighted that we didn't pick up his 5th-year option, even though there's really no precedence to give him a 5th-year option considering he was hurt last year? Well,
yeah, I think also something as well you could kind of put in the conversation that also works for Daniel Jones, but against it as well, when you come up with this price tag shit, is number one, he could come out and say to Joe Shane and Brian Dable, well, my production's low because I didn't have a team around me. Well, then again, that would work against Daniel Jones because you'll want to build a team around him, but the price is infringing.
That's right. And that's what we're talking about. It's kind of a lose-lose. Apart from the transition, the tag itself is a lose because the $32 million basically completely ends your free agency. But if you give him $45 million, and if it's front loaded, it ends your free agency. And if it's back loaded, right, then okay, maybe you'll be able to build the team for this year, but then you're gonna be screwed next year. So that's a lose-lose. And it's all for a very limited ceiling. It's for the ceiling is at best you make one playoff appearance, I think, with that. You're not going to go much farther than that. We're not talking Super Bowls with this team. So that's what I'm talking about. What is the point? Like, what is the reason to be going all in when your only ceiling is you might make the playoffs and you maybe get out of the first round of the playoffs, but there's not much further. Like, that's what I'm talking about. You have to weigh it going financially. What's the positives and negatives out of this? Like, what's the very maximum we can go here if we were to pay Daniel Jones what he wants? And because then if you pay him what he wants, that means you're not going to be able to extend everyone that we were talking about earlier, who are real cornerstones. And then just a lot of pressure on the draft. And considering where we are in the first round, we're towards the bottom of the draft and of the first round. So again, what kind of talent are you're going to have to be lucky to get elite talent at that stage. So, I mean, the Giants are kind of got a very difficult situation ahead. I personally do think this is very selfish of Daniel Jones asking for this kind of money. He's changing agents, right? And you don't change agents to make less money. That's just my opinion. I don't think anyone changes agents to then go, right, let's make a easier deal for my team and give me less money. I don't think that was the case with this. I think he changed agents in order to make more money. And especially considering he's left CAA, who had a very good very good relationship with the Giants. Eli Manning's with CAA. The Giants are very comfortable with CAA. He moved off of CAA to a company that wants to make a name for themselves. They don't have the name that CAA has. Still, and I think they want to reset the market. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. And, why can't Daniel Jones, considering he's best friends with Saquon Barkley, why isn't Daniel Jones going, right, I think I need to be realistic here and ask for a little less in order to bring someone who's so important to this franchise back, and that's Saquon Barkley. But if you're putting a 4 in the front of your contract, it makes that very difficult to bring both back because it's starting to get unmanageable now. If you're 20% of your cap is going to Daniel Jones and then another $14 million goes to Saquon Barkley, the Giants have painted themselves into a situation where they've got a very moderate ceiling. Yeah. I'm very concerned about it.
Definitely. There's reason to be.
The only way out, in my opinion, is just in terms of paying him long-term, incentive-based. Other than that, doesn't work.
Yeah, unless there's an out after 2 years. If it was a 4-year deal and there's an out after 2, okay.
Yeah. But here's how you could kind of stretch that, though, and I don't think the Giants will have to stretch it in the situation I'm about to describe. Is we've seen some of these deals, right? Let's go back to 2020-21 for a second. Where Dave Gettleman signed James Bradbury, they signed Blake Martinez, and then he signed Adoree Jackson as well. And then also, now this year, Joe Shane signed Mark Lewinsky. But let's go back to the Gettleman stuff. Those contracts were designed to get out after 2 years. They were 3-year contracts, right? But the problem with seeing that now is because we had to restructure the Bradbury contract, then cut him. So if you happen to restructure some of these contracts, they're not getting out after 2 years. But I don't think that situation is going to happen because the Giants have a shit ton of cap in 2024. But with that being said, just because you have a lot of cap doesn't mean you have to throw money at things that are not worth this amount of money.
Mm-hmm. With a limited upside. So we're at this stage now where this Daniel Jones contract is overriding, but we're also hearing rumors that the Giants are very interested in the top end of the Mike linebacker market. Alex, have you heard anything more on that?
I've heard a little bit at the combine. They've done some research on and due diligence on the draft guys, like Noah Sewell's one. They also checked out two others, Trenton Simpson and Drew Sanders. But I mean, they gotta
What
have
about my
money to
guy
go out.
Papo?
I haven't seen anything yet that they've checked him out, but along those lines, you have to have money to sign these Mike linebackers. I mean, the cheapest option is probably going to be David Long, but he's not. I don't think he's as good as Edwards or Edmonds. So, I mean,
No. And
you
what
have to
about
have
Jermaine
money.
Pratt? Where would you rank Pratt?
I think he played for a contract.
You really?
Yeah, some of
His
his
numbers are
numbers.
kind of in line with the other guys at the top end, though. Like it's not completely different from Edmonds, for instance.
Right, but like 2019 and 2020, the Bengals defense wasn't that good. 21, obviously okay, and then 22 it got better, and that's when he got better. But I mean, I don't know if you're a big PFF guy, Donald. PFF
Yeah.
like dislikes him the first 3 years, and then this year was good. I'm not in line with that. Whether
Okay.
Edmonds, it's 2-time Pro Bowler, TJ Edwards, obviously has been the best linebacker for the Eagles the past 3 years. So, that's just my philosophy on things.
Okay, Luca, what's your thoughts on the Mike market and free agency and the draft that the Giants could attack?
Obviously, you could attack the second round a little bit, but for the Mike, I'm going to go. I think the Giants should actually try for Tremaine Edmonds and, or TJ Edwards. I know, by the way, talking about Papo, there was his RAS score was actually just released from the combine. His RAS score is, just give me 1 second. Papo, here you go. An RAS score of 9.24U. That means elite. Composite speed grade, elite. Composite explosion grade, elite. But they don't like his size. He benched very well, but his weight at 225 and his 6 foot stature, 6'2", I think, not great.
No, he's undersized for the position, but I love the speed aspect, and I think that he'd be a steal at where he ends up. I think you could probably get him in like the third round. I think he'd be a steal there, in my opinion.
In the 4.4 in the 40-yard dash, he ran a 4.39.
Really good.
Yep. I don't think there's anything other to know from that.
There's also I think there's a good chance that the Giants are going to be in on the defensive tackle market too. Like Kalijah Clancy had apparently Clancy had an all-time combine where he was the fastest since 2006, fastest defensive tackle since 2006 coming out of the combine, right?
I think I heard something like that.
Joe Shane absolutely gave up the fact that they have no depth at defensive tackle. So
did. And then there's also another good one that I really like is Gervon Dexter of Florida. Florida's team stunk, but Gervon Dexter is a bit of a beast, and he's someone that could play on the edge of a front three, or he could also play in the interior, back up behind Dex. I think that's someone to consider as well if he drops to the second round.
Yeah.
We got my man Tuto. My man, how is it going, my brother? Massive salute and respect to Big Boss Donnie, Alex, and Luca. Greetings from Italy. You're in Italy, my guy. Good to see you. Good to see you. Well, it's been a really good chat. So we'll go to final thoughts here. Luca, what's your final thoughts on the Giants situation here?
Final thoughts from an outsider NFL fan. Joe Shane, don't fuck this up.
I think he's about to. Sorry to say it. I think he's about to. Alex?
I don't agree with signing Daniel Jones to a long-term deal with the $40 million mark on it, but I think even though this is kind of a company boy standpoint, I think I'm not going to say trust the process, but I want to see how other things play out and how Joe Shane justifies it in terms of building the team. If you sign Daniel Jones to $40+ million a year, you better build a very good team around him. And if not, it's all coming back to you.
How are you going to do that?
It's not my point to prove, it's his.
That's true. It's true. It's just all you can look at is the body of work of other NFL franchises and how many NFL franchises have rebuilt from scratch when you've assigned 40 million, with 20% of your cap on one player who's average.
Absolutely right.
That's
No,
my
you're not
point.
wrong.
It's
Not
not
wrong.
that I strongly dislike Daniel Jones. It's not that I don't rate Daniel Jones. It's not that I don't appreciate the year that I just had. I just have to. I loved that year. Like, it meant a lot to me because it's been such a long time. It meant a lot to Alex too. It's been such a long time since the Giants were good, and Daniel Jones did a lot for that. But that season's over now. It's done, right? It was great. It's in the past. Now we have to move forward. And if you're objective and you take a step back and you take your fandom hat off and go, well, thank you, Daniel. It was great. Oh, love you, Daniel. You take a step back and you go, right, what's the mass here? What do we need to build? How are we going to build it? The odds are against you by giving him that contract. The odds are very much against you. And I don't know why Joe Shane is putting him in a situation where in just year one of your rebuild that you're lessening your odds of putting together a championship team. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it really will not make sense to me. And that's my final thoughts on the matter. But everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, respect to Rob and thoughts to him and his family. I hope that everything goes well and that we see Rob back very, very soon as my co-host. That would be great. But in the meantime, share this out, like it, watch it again. We'll keep sharing this out because I think it was a good chat. Certainly covered a lot of things. It was very, very good, productive chat about the G-Men. And Bill showed up in the last minute. Well, man, just watch it back and give your thoughts and put a comment in what you thought about what we were saying. In the meantime, have a great weekend, people, and we will hit you in the next podcast. Oh, hey, mates. See, everyone's coming in the last minute.
You know what? How about this? Catch us at 6 p.m. for Friday Night Knicks.
Yes. Catch us at 6 p.m. for Friday Night
Bronx
Knicks.
channel.
MH, watch this episode back. You'll
be fine.
You'll enjoy. Okay. Speak to you guys soon. Bye-bye.